All right, chapter 2. I will be a unifying church member. This might be the hardest chapter, in all honesty. Just right out the gate, John 13:35, Jesus says they will know us by our love. For those of y'all that were around when I first got here, you'll remember I actually started with a sermon series called Love One Another. And this is why. It is foundation to everything. It is how people recognize our church as a church. It's how the people of God are known as the people of God. It's by our love for one another. So if we don't get that right, it really doesn't matter what else we do. John 13:35, highlight it, do what you got to do. How do people know our church, though? How do people know your church? If you're not a member of Chilhowee, that's fine. But what do people say about the church you attend? What's its reputation? Is it love? My prayer and my hope and my goal is that when people talk about Chilhowee Baptist Church, the first thing out of their mouth is, man, do they love one another and they love the community. They're just a people that love to love and just active in that. That's where we're heading. That's my goal. Will we mess it up sometimes? Probably so. But we're going to do our best to keep going and to make that what we're known for. So unity is essential for church health, right? He talks a lot about unity and being together. It's essential because that's how we work together, right? It's when we're united that we're the most efficient and the most powerful as a church. That when we can work together in unity. That word fellowship, by the way, a lot of times we think of it as like a meal together, but fellowship is that united in mission. And so if our mission is to give God glory and to help people know Christ, then we'll be united together under that umbrella. So unity is essential for church health, but also it doesn't happen by accident. And that's the gist that he's going through here, right? That this isn't an accidental thing that people just happen to like one another. They happen to get along. It takes work, right? Marriage takes work, husband and wife, those early days of lovey-dovey and passion, those are the easy days because you got chemicals in your brain making you go nuts. You got the flutters, you got the whole 9 yards, right? But there comes a point, usually by the end of that first year, and if you go a whole year, that's impressive, but at some point, that's when the work has to set in, and you have to actually work at loving one another, right? And then as the years go by, you got to work harder. So that's just part of it. All right. Then he talks a lot about gossip, and here's a thought question for you, right? I'm not going to answer this, but I won't throw it out at you. Why do you think he harps on gossip so much, right? What is it about gossip that tears up our unity? So that's a good discussion for you to have in your groups. All right. So the last section he talks about is forgiveness. And this is probably going to be the hardest part for a lot of us. Because when we think about the idea of forgiving, what we're also thinking about is those people that have hurt us in the past. And it happens all the time. Unfortunately, we all want our churches to be happy places and nobody ever does anything wrong because everybody's excited to be there and all that. But the fact is that we're sinners and somebody's going to do something to hurt us. And so we have to be willing to forgive because Jesus said that people would know us by our love for one another, and loving one another entails that we're able to forgive one another. I would encourage you to read up on forgiveness and read up on what Jesus says, especially in Matthew, about forgiving people, because it is a requirement, and it's a hard thing. And there's definitely grace involved with that. Please don't misunderstand. God will guide you through that. He'll help you through that, and He'll send His Holy Spirit to empower you to do that. But we have to be willing to listen to God as He's telling us those things. So I'll leave you with this part, these two questions, right? Question number 1: who do you need to forgive, right? Who in your past? In the book he talked about his teacher from high school, so years gone by. Who in your past do you need to forgive? It might not be as heavy as an abuse situation, and it might be. Who knows? But that is one of those things that is tremendously hard for us as a person, as a human being, to be able to forgive the unforgivable. But as Christians, that's what we're called to do, because God has forgiven the unforgivable in us. And so he likewise calls us to do the same. So if that person you need to forgive, though, is not a member of your church, then it is a little bit easier, right? Because you can kind of shove that off, and you don't have to see them when you come to church, so it's not that big a deal. But if they are a member, then I would encourage you to right now wrestle with how are you going to forgive them, because we've got to maintain the unity of the church. So seek out ways to forgive others. But on the flip side, who do you need to ask forgiveness from? I've said, anytime there's a breakup, anytime there's two people that they just don't want to get along anymore, rarely is it just one person's fault. Yes, that does happen, and yes, you might look back and say, nope, I did everything 100% right. You might be right, but statistically, you're probably wrong. There's probably something that you could have done differently. And if nothing else, right, look at it now, where you're at now, right? What can you do differently now? How can you better respond in love to this person? Because even if you say that you've done nothing wrong, well, holding on to that bitterness, holding on to that hate, that in itself is wrong. So at the very least, we have to get to a point where we can just let that go and give it to God. And again, I'm very well aware these are easier said than done things, but that's the task that God has called us to. And as being a unifying member in a church, that's the task we have to accomplish. Being willing to forgive that person that sits in that other pew, or wherever they are at, behind you, front of you, whatever. We have to be willing to forgive them. Because I'll tell you this too, for a lot of people, they don't even know that you're still embittered against them, right? I mean, unless you're one of these types that you make sure your opinion's well known, which is few and far between. There's not a whole lot of us left in the world, but unless you've just outright told them, they may not even realize that they've hurt you. And that's happened to me. I've had people come to me and say, I can't believe you did this, and do you realize what you've done? And I'm standing there going, I have no idea what we're talking about. What? So I have to ask for forgiveness, because forgiveness, one, for whatever I did, and two, because I didn't know what we're talking about. So, but if we'll communicate, right, that's the first step towards it, and just listen to the Holy Spirit as He guides you in that. All right, this is great. That was chapter 2. I'll see y'all again for chapter 3.